use auto start and you can just watch it queue in, and then there you go. Okay.
And we
I just
are
saw
live.
Okay, good evening, good morning, good day. Hello, everybody, wherever you are watching us from. Today, we are going to talk about this ugly business of war. We've got a couple of guests here that are going to give us the rundown. We welcome Starsky, Dick, Nicholas, and my co-host, the Afro-Atheist. How are you guys doing today?
Doing fine, thank you.
Doing well, thank you.
Doing very well, thank you.
Amazing.
It's cold over here, but doing okay.
Right. So, as with everything, I think we should, we should start by getting. You have to have been living under a rock to know, to not know what's going on in Eastern Europe at the moment. And for those of us who are connoisseurs of news channels, it seems like the news cycle has died out a little bit. It's not as high up in the news as we are used to seeing it a year ago. But what I think is a very good starting place is just for to understand the background about what were the preceding events that triggered this, and maybe to get an insight into the milieu, so to speak, of the political landscape between Russia and this part of the world, Ukraine. I don't know which one of you guys, maybe Starsky, you can get us started on just a little bit of background, so we can, fully understand what the complexities and what is involved in that situation.
Sure. I think we should start with probably USSR times, maybe even earlier, because Ukraine, as we know, was invaded by Russians for centuries. It was never vice versa. They always attacked Ukraine and trying to capture as much territories as they could, historically, basically. And during the Soviet times, when Bolsheviks invaded Ukraine, again, that was about to become an independent country, almost exactly 100 years ago. Since that time, we see that they started using and developing those institutions of propaganda. As we know that Bolshevik Revolution was, it became possible, okay, due to professional revolutionaries, people who could speak, who could, ignite the masses of people, and they basically developed this thing that we know today as propaganda. And they didn't stop there. They went further. They implement all kinds of technologies, informational technologies, nowadays into all kinds of their spheres of their life. And we're talking about their music, their movies, literature, not even mentioning their media and stuff. But as for the USSR, Russians not only occupied Ukraine, as we know, they occupied a lot of different states. Some states were controlled by Russia, by communist Russia, basically, like Baltic countries, some Asian countries, and of course Ukraine and Belarus. In the Soviet Union, it was very, let's say, very popular to be Russian. So when you came from, let's say, Uzbekistan, of course you could speak your language and know your history and whatever, but you would only have some career opportunities if you could speak perfect Russian language and live somewhere in Moscow, for example. Same thing was with Ukrainians. So Ukrainians were often laughed at because we spoke Ukrainian language. That's why for some period of time it became kind of unpopular to speak Ukrainian because they would look at you as if you were a rural person. Basically, Ukrainian people from villages, from Ukrainian farmers, basically, they only started receiving passports in 70s. Without passports, they couldn't leave their village and go to big city and settle in a big city and stuff like that. So you had to become Russian. You had to assimilate. You had to completely change your nationality, even though it's not really possible because for obvious reasons. But you had to change. And for many, many years, such nationalities as Ukrainian, Belarusians, Uzbeks, Kazakhs, and other people that were occupied and controlled by communist Russia, they were something that in Nazi Germany would be called Untermensch, like lower people, lower race. That's why being yourself was highly unpopular. And Russians, after collapse of USSR, Russians still have this because they still see other countries as part of their empire. They still see other people as lower races that in order, basically, yes, subhumans, as it's mentioned in the chat. That in order to become humans, they have to, grow up and become Russians and become part of this Russian empire. And that's the reason why we have what we have. Basically, Putin explained very clearly the reason he invaded Ukraine one day prior to this invasion, when he was trying to justify the upcoming invasion and things like that. And he said a lot of things about Ukrainians that don't exist as a nation, about our language and culture that never existed to Russians, that Ukraine was created by Lenin, which I still don't really understand because Lenin never visited Ukraine, by the way. And things like that. So they, again, because they have a lot of this propaganda in Russia, they claim that Ukrainian language, history, and culture were created by Austrian, Polish Martians, and because there's a lot of anti-Semites in Russia, they also claim that Ukraine was basically controlled by this Zionist occupational government. So in order to destroy this God's chosen beautiful Russian nation that must dominate the world, that's basically that's the explanation, like the primitive explanation.
Yeah, it sounds very racist and imperialist, to be quite frank with you. I mean, just if you look at it from, from a, how can we call, from an imperialist lens, it's almost like there is this ideology that there's a unique Russian identity and an empire, and it tries to, by means of conquest, reclaim something that is not rightfully theirs. But that's just my superficial take on it. I'm sure there's a lot of nuance, especially when it comes to a cultural identity as a people that we don't get and that we don't understand. Looking, in from the outside. Do you experience as well that there is maybe a Russian identity? But I mean, you alluded to it earlier, with a superior and an inferior type of person, which is why I labeled it implicitly as racist. Because regardless of whether you are the same ethnicity. It's a cultural racism almost.
I completely agree with you. It's completely racist, but it's exactly the reason why they say that they are fighting against Nazi. And they're talking not only about like Ukrainian Nazi, of course, that are ruled by a Jewish Ukrainian president, but also they speak about all other nations of the world that oppose this war. And the reason they are Nazi is only because they are fighting against this Russian terrorism, that they don't support Russian terrorism. They were talking a lot about Ukrainian Nazi. Okay, my question always was, how many Black people, Asian people, Jewish people, how many Muslim people were hurt by Ukrainian Nazi in Ukraine between 2014 and 2021? And they usually answer, I don't care, you are you don't like Russians, that's why you are Nazi, basically. That's the answer. In Russian culture, and specifically in their modern social media, you can see all kinds of this propagandist BS about fighting against Western Nazi. And they have this they have this thing like, we have to finish all those Western Nazi that we didn't finish during the World War II. And they're talking about like British Nazi and French Nazi and like Canadian Nazi, whatever. So currently Russians have this mission of fighting against the worldwide Nazi, because everybody is Nazi except for Russians, of course.
Yeah, it sounds to me like a scapegoat that they invented as part of the propaganda machine, to be very, very honest.
Starsky, we've talked about it on the shows before. There's a term for this Russian sort of belief, this superiority thing, right? It kind of all stems out of this, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a Russian world, so-called Ruski Mir. The word Mir is very interesting because it means both peace and world. And when they talk about Ruski Mir, they basically speak like, Russian peace, Russia, like, you gotta be friends with Russia, of course, or we will kill you. And at the same time, it has like double meaning, like Russian world domination.
Yeah.
And basically this ideology has a couple of, let's say, foundations. Okay, it's faith, or Orthodox Russian Church. It's Russian sportsmen that are, of course, the strongest in the world. Is Russian people that are, again, God's chosen, and they are better than all those stupid Westerners, because Russian people have this connection with cosmos and nature and yada yada. And in their
Now that sounds Nazi to me.
No doubt.
If that isn't Nazi, I wonder what is.
In there, of course, it has this Ruski Mir, this Russian world. It has a lot of gaps, because they're talking about protect.
He'll be back.
Is that me or?
No, that's him. He'll be back. Give him a sec.
Yeah.
Yep, you're back.
Yeah. Okay. So they're talking about protecting their Russian Slavic Orthodox identity from Westerners and gays and other nations. However, they are a multinational country themselves, because they have a lot of people of different races and nations and ethnicities and beliefs. That's why when they speak about protecting Russian Orthodox Church, it's very funny to see Kadyrovites from Chechnya, or that are Muslims, or for example, Buryats or Yakuts. Buryats are Buddhists, basically, that for some reason must protect Russian Orthodox Church or Slavic identity, and none of them are Slavic, obviously. So it has a lot of different gaps, but at the same time, they still have this, you have to assimilate, like you have to become Russian, you have to learn Russian language, of course, and you have to assimilate. If you have this Russian spirit, then you're one of us.
Do you have to adopt the religion as well? Do you have to be Orthodox?
It's like better if you have it, but on the other hand, nobody cares. Orthodox Church is only used in their propaganda, because Orthodox Church is something that their roots are growing from. Let's call it this way. You don't really have to adopt Russian Orthodox faith, because they don't follow this faith at all.
Right.
If we take a look at Russian soldiers who invaded Ukraine and committed all of those atrocities, stealing, raping, basically they broke every commandment in those 10 commandments, right? They don't really care about it, but it's part of their propaganda. They have to have those huge events, and they have to speak a lot about their roots, Slavic people that are endangered by West and gays and things like that. And of course,
yes.
Ukrainians who wanted to invade this small and peaceful country called Motherland Russia.
You just mentioned the G word, gay, and I was just waiting to ask you that question. So, is it true that one of the reasons why this war is going on is the idea that they want to clean up Ukraine because they're a bit more secular, they're a bit more accepting of the gay people, and starting to be more progressive? Is this true or not?
It fuels their hatred, basically, because you can see their most recent videos that are aimed at Western target audience, and their most recent video that was cringy as hell was about this American man who wants to celebrate Christmas, but he cannot find a person to celebrate with because he's like a bachelor. So he tries to find a girl, but they can't find a girl for him because everybody's gay. And then he goes to Russia, where there's only heterosexual people, and he's so happy. Like,
I saw that video.
It's on
you
YouTube.
can't see it.
Yeah.
You can't see it right now, but my eyes are popping out of my head.
Didn't you see that?
There was that one, and then the one where they're on the airplane and they're asked to move, they move the passengers on all those propaganda videos are awesome, and the production values aren't bad.
It's amazing. They have this hatred towards gays that is popularized. There's this top Russian propagandist, Dmitry Solovyov, and he's like Conan O'Brien, okay? Level of Conan O'Brien, only in Russia. And he likes to say, and again, it's on a YouTube, he likes to say that gays should not be accepted as donors, and their hearts must be, it's a quote actually, their hearts must be burnt in crematoriums. And it was basically on the national TV, and people were applauding. They call people from my area, they basically confirm that they call Europe gay Europe. They invented this word to call Europe because again, their propaganda, their media, their church, they all claim that there are no heterosexual people in Europe left at all. So that's why they use this topic to fuel their hatred towards West, towards everything Western, and Ukrainians as well, because Ukrainians are Europeans.
But keep
So
keep in mind, though, one of the takeaways is it depends on who they're talking to as to what the reasons are for invading Ukraine. So the reasons are to denazify it, or to cleanse it in one way or another, or it's to protect minorities, depending on who they're. So they.
Oh my
what
God.
was it? The rock band Pussy Riot was jailed because of their LGBTQ. They were openly advocating for LGBTQ rights, so that's why they're jailed. But then when Putin is talking to the West, he says, "Well, they really hate gays in Ukraine, and we're going in to help protect them." It's sort of like, yeah, it really. They're going in to eliminate gays or to help gays, depending on who they're talking to at any given moment.
So at this point, where's this war at right now? Where are we at now? What's the status of things at the moment?
The status is following. Currently, we are having a positional warfare. Let's call it this way. We have this. How you call it? A stalemate, basically, because Ukraine liberated as much territories as we could with those weapons that we had. And currently we are in the situation when, in order to continue liberating our territories from Russians, we require a lot of offensive weaponry, including tanks and long-range missiles. Russians, on the other hand, bring their reserves. They concentrate those mobilized men that were mobilized in Russia on the occupied territories, and we're talking about the numbers up to 500,000 people. So they had around 330 men that were already there on the occupied territories of Ukraine, and they will bring more than 100 mobilized men additionally to the territory of Ukraine, and they are planning to occupy rest of the Donbas region, and hopefully for them to occupy those territories that were proclaimed as annexed, like Zaporizhia and Kherson and others. So we are looking at the end of February, maybe even earlier, maybe in a couple of weeks, this offensive will start. And we expect a lot of some very, very hard combat in that area. Probably it will be supported by the invasion from the northern direction. We're talking about Belarus. It won't bring any results because they don't have enough personnel concentrated at this point in Belarus. But the problem is they will use it to distract our reserves. So that might be a problem for a while at least. And eventually, of course, I think it will take maybe years additionally, but eventually their troops will be eliminated in big numbers using our aid, military aid that we started receiving from our Western allies, because currently it's the only way to solve this problem. We have to liberate our territories that were occupied. We have to push the invaders out of Ukraine, and we have to regain the control over the occupied territories. We have to reintegrate all those people who spent years living on those territories back into Ukrainian society. And we have to make sure that Russia will never attack again. But it will take years. It will take many thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of casualties on both sides, unfortunately.
It's winter in Ukraine right now, so they can't move mechanized nearly as easily. So it's not going to be till end of February till the fighting has been dramatically reduced. It will pick up again, as Starsky said. They're both preparing. Both sides are preparing for a major offensive, and my suspicion is you'll see it in the news again. One of the reasons it's dropped out of the news is because the fighting has been significantly reduced because it's winter. The mechanized is mostly stalled.
Well, Nick, there is a recent news from Bakhmut, for example, is that Russians are massively losing their personnel due to new weapons that started arriving to the area. We know that today, specifically, Ukrainian artillery hit multiple areas where Russians concentrated their personnel, as well as some command points. So there is one area basically that there's some very active combat is going.
Well, and they're still dropping artillery on Kyiv. So I mean, they're still fighting. There's absolutely still fighting, especially through artillery. But the front line isn't really moving because they can't move the artillery through the snow. So not the artillery, sorry, the mechanized. Anything mechanized, you're going to have troubles with in the snow. So the combat is. The actual, and especially Bakhmut, for whatever reason, the Russians really, they're throwing everything they've got at it. But you're not going to see the significant frontline combat's going to be diminished until towards the end of February was my only point. And I think that's when you're going to start to see the big shifts again. You're going to see the big battles over huge cities. Right now, it's Bakhmut, and the Russians can't get anything there anyway until February. So. The Ukrainians are holding it.
But what do you think the end game is here? What is Russia's end game here? What do they want to achieve by this? Is it just like a complete? Do they just want to rub Ukraine off the map? Do they want to assimilate? I mean, like, what is the end game?
The end game for Russians, basically, their goal is to eliminate Ukrainian state. Change it to something different, annex territories. Basically, it looks very easy because you only have to bring plenty of armed people and have some kind of referenda in the area, and voila, like you can draw whatever numbers you want. So that's exactly what they did in Kherson, for example, even in Crimea. So that is their goal. They need to eliminate Ukrainian nation. And that's, by the way, the reason why they are hitting civilian objects so hard. What they do is what they do. They are killing Ukrainians because every Ukrainian, in their opinion, is an enemy for Russians. We remember all those peaceful protests against Russian occupiers in Kherson, for example, where people would go on the streets massively and protesting against Russian invaders, stopping tanks basically with their bare hands. That's the reason why they committed so many atrocities in the cities. Basically, it's a ethnically based invasion.
And culturally, I think Starsky's got it. I think Starsky's absolutely got it. They want to wipe the physical country off the map. They also want to wipe the culture out, and they want to wipe the people out. That's why when they occupy these lands, they butcher and murder the people, and or they ship the Ukrainians to the eastern Russia, where they have no chance of doing anything but assimilating into Russian culture. It is the absolute destruction of Ukraine in every sense of the word. That's what they're seeking. That's their end game.
Yeah, I don't know. Genocide isn't a good look. It really is.
That's the correct word. That's the correct word. Yes.
Exactly, and it's heartbreaking. War never solves anything. Never has. It never will. It only just makes things worse, in my opinion. The casualties and people who they just want to be left alone, just want to live life. Um, and I just my heart breaks. A lot of displaced people, a lot of people not sure whether they will ever go back to Ukraine. It's I don't know. It's just something that there was a question I just saw in the chat. Let's see. Yes, this one. Yes, by Tone Otson. He says, "Who might be able to wake up the Russians concerning that they in fact are speaking about themselves when speaking of narcissism?" I mean,
Kasparov, that's why he's been exiled.
The problem with that is because Russians went through this brainwashing for decades, it will take decades to restore their mind. You know what I'm talking about? It's not gonna be instantly. It's not possible to do it instantly. So they need some kind of rehabilitation because Russian propaganda is something that you cannot just convince people that went through this brainwashing process for years and years. It requires some different approach. I don't know what kind of approach. I'm not a specialist, unfortunately. So I think that experts gotta think about it. They should invent some antidote against it, but it will take years. And a lot of people, even those who ran away from Russia, trying to escape the mobilization and things, we know that they don't have any remorse about Ukrainians. It's they didn't run away from Russia because they supported Ukraine. They literally wanted to leave. That's the reason, and they still keep that all those ideas that they were packed with during those decades. They still have that in them, inside them.
can I just something that just came to my mind right now. I've heard it said in Christian circles that the war in Ukraine is a sign from God, a sign of the end times, a sign. It's been predicted in the Bible, and I think to myself that if this is how God chooses to give you a sign, then there's something wrong with your God, and there's something wrong with you, because people don't have to die in droves just to prove a point, right? Where on earth is it in the Bible that there's going to be a war between Ukraine and Russia, right? It sickens me that people would look at the plight of others and somehow this is a God thing. God is involved somehow in this. I know it's completely off topic, but I've heard it said, and if there's anyone who's actually thinking this, then shame on you if your God chooses to use a war to give you a sign. Shame on you.
But it's quite striking, Esther, now that you mention it, that this idea of the resurgence of the Russian Orthodox Church, in a country that was, while under communism, predominantly atheist, and now there's this resurgence of the Russian Orthodox Church, and I'm sure that there is some there's some flavor of influence there into the whole mix, of patriotism, which ties in with, this expansionist and reclamation of previous territories and incorporation of previous people. But it's, religion just helps. It doesn't make people look at things from an objective humanist perspective. It basically just fuels that us versus them. It's good versus evil. It's us versus the Ukrainians. It's us versus the, whoever you can think of. So
it's a very interesting topic because, as we all know, USSR was like officially atheistic country, okay, and they ruined a lot of churches. Thousands of them were ruined by Russian communists and Bolsheviks. So how did the church survive in the USSR? Because we still see that there were plenty of churches still active in the USSR, in Moscow specifically. The answer for that is very simple, and it's a very widely known fact, actually. I think Nick knows about it. So during Soviet times, 99% of priests worked for KGB. And the reason for that is because a lot of people were coming to them to confess, and they would tell a lot of different secrets, that you wouldn't tell to authorities, for example.
Holy God.
That's why there was like a separate branch of KGB that would supervise those churches. After this collapse of the USSR, Russian FSB, ex-KGB basically, they had a lot of control over Ukrainian people, because there was this Russian church in Ukraine, Russian Orthodox Church, and they had a lot of, they would gather people and tell them all kinds of BS, that we are all Russian people, you should, fight against Ukrainian Nazism. So after a while, in 2014, we noticed that a lot of Russian invaders that would come to Ukraine to fight, they would be met by those Russian Orthodox priests on the territory of Ukraine. A lot of them were involved into supplying those terrorists. Some of them were even fighting, like actually fighting on the front lines. There's plenty of cases. And after banning this Russian Orthodox Church for supporting terrorism in Ukraine, there was a lot of, let's say, angry people out there on the West specifically, saying that you cannot do this because it's like you're standing against freedom of speech and belief. Again, there's a slight difference between freedom of speech and propaganda of terrorism, because I think if you see a person on a street proclaiming ISIS is a good business, you gotta join, because again, it's based on their belief. You would call police, right? So that's the thing here. And one more thing I wanted to tell you about their Orthodox Church. Russian chaplains they're the only chaplains, except for ISIS, I think. They're the only kind of chaplains that can use weapons and kill people. So in Russia, specifically in Russian airborne troops, they have this separate training for their Orthodox chaplains. They jump with parachutes, they shoot AKs, and they learn how to operate weapons and things like that. Guys, there are so many things. Like, I can talk about for hours. They have this they have this huge central church, military church, military monastery in Moscow, with
Church.
icon of Stalin inside.
Oh my God!
Who
Wow.
basically
Stalin wiped them out. Yeah.
who was wiping them out. Or they gladly, when they baptize warriors or baptize things like, weapons, they not only baptize Orthodox people, but also Muslims like those Kadyrovites or Dagestani who fight for Russian army. Like, they don't care really. And also they easily baptize those nuclear missiles called Satan, which is kind of cringy. So I can talk about it for hours because it's a good source for cringe.
We got a question. We got a question. Secular Sakai asks, will the Chechen Republic of Icaria, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Icaria, ever become secular? Icaria ever become secular if they gain independence?
Could be, because in Icaria there were a lot of people who were like completely sane and sober. President Dudayev, the one who was again killed by Russians, he was a completely sober and decent person. Again, who didn't care about, let's say, I think he was secular because there were Ukrainian volunteers fighting for Chechnya, for Ichkeria, and we spoke the same language basically. And the reason why Chechen fighters support Ukraine today, we're not talking about Kadyrovites because Kadyrovites are a completely separate story. The reason why they support us today is because Ukrainians were fighting for Ichkeria in the 90s. They were supporting Chechen people. The reason why Georgians fight for Ukraine for the same reason, because in 1993 we were supporting Georgians as well as 2008. But I believe that again, Russian propaganda created this image of Islamic angry Chechen who is dreaming of beheading Russians, beheading those Orthodox Russians, which is again a complete BS. I was listening to this Russian propaganda in the 90s almost every day because we had a lot of Russian television, and the two words Chechen terrorists would sound like every 5 minutes, and it would make you believe that they are all terrorists.
I had a comment. I didn't want to step on Dick. I don't know if Dick wanted to say something. The only thing
yeah. No, I think it's appropriate, but the whole Satan thing there.
Could it be Satan?
The only thing I'll point out that I think is worth knowing, Stalin wiped out the church because it was the best challenge, most significant challenge to his power. Once the church was gone, there was no way to really consolidate and come after him. So people took the church seriously then. Like Starsky said earlier, I don't think they take it seriously now. I actually consider the modern Russia to be rather secular. The head of the church, the patriarch, Kilry, I think his name is Kirill, who's been in Kirill. He has come out and endorsed the war and done all these other things. He is his nickname is Little Putin because he basically does whatever Putin instructs him to do, and he is a former member of the FSB. So he is quote former member of the FSB. So that is the head of the church in Russia right now. I don't consider it a legitimate church by any stretch of the imagination. But I think both of those facts are probably worth knowing in this discussion.
Yeah.
There was a comment. Let's see here. I think I've lost it. Just give me 1 second. Oh, never mind. It was Secular Sakai. Thank you, Secular Sakai. I appreciate that. Well, I've lost the comment now. Well, thank you. It was something about activism and coming together. I've lost it.
But that's also something that I wanted to touch on. It's like throughout my adult life, there's one thing I detest. It's being in this situation where you feel powerless to do anything to change a situation, and I was saying to myself, like, what can we do? Like, what can I as a person do to, besides bitching and moaning on the internet about it? There's so little that we can do to affect change, but there has to be a point at which the cultural zeitgeist shifts, and this kind of thing becomes unacceptable and just not something that we do. I don't know if any of you also share this this disdain that I have for feeling powerless in these situations, because I see it as such an injustice. It's as a non-believer, like, I know what it's like to be up against a wave of nonsense that comes from all sides, and I don't know. I find that all atheists are basically against injustice. Just because we sit in the situation where we're being forced to do to face this whole religious onslaught, and now I see the parallel here as well. Like, there's an imposition of will on people who are not willing to submit to it, and the same kind of injustice really resonates deep in me. And I just want to, like, I wish I could do something. So what can we do as people? Besides create awareness and speak about it? And
if you're in the U.S., there's a lot you can do. There's a lot you can do. First thing is what?
Sorry.
Well, German. If you're in any of the countries in the U, it's easiest for me because I'm an American, so I can talk about some of the issues here that we're having. If you're in any country that's supporting Ukraine, Ukraine needs weapons. They need money. They need support. They need logistics on top of the weapons and all this other stuff, which Starsky's already outlined and everybody already knows. In the U.S., that's been a problem in Germany. So if you're in Germany and you want to write a letter, don't email. Write a letter. If you're either serious about helping or not. And the good news is it's actually not that hard to do. The bad news is most people don't take the time to do it. If you're in the U.S., take an hour. Take an hour. Sit down. Figure out who are, first of all, make sure you know who your congressman is, both in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. Write 3 separate letters. Make sure they're letters, because they don't bother reading emails. They have staffers. The staffers will probably read the letter, but the letter they'll pay attention to and say, I will never vote for anyone who does not support Ukraine. Send those letters. Then the next weekend, if you feel like you've done everything you can to help, I have another idea. Find out who the top 3 senators are or congressmen who are against the supporting Ukraine and who want to pull back funding for Ukraine. Send them letters and say, I'm not one of your constituents, but I know your constituents, and I am willing to donate to people who oppose you solely on the grounds of your position on Ukraine. Send that letter. Every weekend, 1 hour, send a letter to somebody in the U.S. in a position of power. If enough people do that, it's going to move the Overton window closer and closer towards being able to help Ukraine longer and longer and longer. They need as much help as they can for as long as possible. And the more the U.S. starts to suffer its own problems, inflation, yada, 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 the less our senators, congressmen will care about Ukraine, and the more they will try to quietly cut funding for it. So you can either join the military. You don't even have to join the military. You can go to Ukraine. They will take you. They will train you, and you can fight. That's not my forte. I'm almost 50 years old. Or you can do something like that, which lets you still keep your life going and donate just a bit. And donating to Ukraine is great, but telling congressmen that you will donate to their opponents if they oppose Ukraine is a great way to, and just, an hour a week, every week, send a letter to a representative.
Yeah, we end the Shill show every week on for Ukraine Update, which is coming up next. Urging people to get a hold of their local politicians and whatnot.
He's going to drop a link too, and it's going to be glowing, and there's all the letters are going to be
The
shimmering.
link,
Okay,
the links are already there. They're already there.
Hey, we ain't called the Shills for nothing.
Sorry, I just had to. Please, I cut you off, but it was I needed the joke. What can I say?
Yeah. But we close out every week urging people to make sure their local politicians are pushing the higher ups and so on and so forth, and just be vocal and keep pushing to make sure that your government's doing all they can to support Ukraine.
Yeah.
I can tell you this thing. In 2013, we had a revolution of dignity in Ukraine. It started when police brutally beat up students, teenagers on the streets. And they thought that Ukrainians would never react. And that's when thousands of Ukrainians went on the streets and protested. And in November, I had a talk with my friends who told me, like, yeah, we participate in this protest, but look at our enemy. It's a dictator, a mafiosi, oligarch known as Yanukovych, Viktor Yanukovych, our former dictator who fled to Russia. He has all the power because Ukraine was pretty much controlled by pro-Russian criminal rings, okay? And they said, look at them, we will never win peacefully. We will be shot at, we will be kidnapped, we will be repressed. We got to prepare for that, which actually happened. But I realized one thing. If you are a droplet of water, you can barely change anything. But if you are a part of an ocean, that can change a lot. And that's why Ukraine had democratic revolution, and we won this revolution. We won this revolution. I participated in this revolution. It was probably like a suicidal attempt for me that time. I don't know. Nobody really believed that we would win, but we did. And that's why I will never agree when somebody says that we cannot change anything. You can. You have so much power inside of you. You just have to realize that. And you have to understand that when people unite together, they can change pretty much everything. And that's what we see today. Looking at people who united around Ukraine, who help Ukraine, and who stand with Ukraine.
It feels like this helped. Not somebody had said, I missed it, but somebody had said raising the profile and talking about it. I don't want to underestimate that. But for the viewers who don't have a platform, for the people listening who don't have a platform, if you do have a platform, have shows like this. That's a great way to help.
Yeah, I don't know. I never, ever since I was a child, I couldn't stand a fucking bully. You know, a person who comes and bullies other people.
Same here.
It grates me the wrong way. It just rubs me up the wrong way. And whenever the irony is just, as soon as the Iron Curtain lifted and everything became open, the true colors came out. It's weird. It's almost like everybody suspected. Hey, wait a minute. If this person is gonna be a bully when they get out, and it's true as fuck. As soon as that Iron Curtain lifted, that bully came out and started swinging punches. It's insane. It's I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Here in Ukraine, we hate bullies so much. So, like 50% of Ukrainian teenagers usually attend boxing. So it's true. Ukraine is a land of boxers. Nice. That's where I lost all of my teeth.
Well, and you guys had the world champion for a little while. He's actually on the front lines. Last I heard, is that right? Boxing like middleweight or lightweight.
During the siege of Kiev, Usyk and Lomachenko, they joined territorial defense, as well as Klitschko brothers, by the way. They also joined territorial defense, and they helped a lot to deflect Russian invasion.
I was just going to say here, just listening to Nicholas saying, if you have a platform, just these are the conversations you should be talking about. And the question is, okay, so why should I care, right? For a lot of us, we don't live in Ukraine. It's nothing to do with us. But then it just takes me back to the Holocaust. I think it was a poem written by someone who, I think they survived the Holocaust. And I would read it. It says, first, they came for the communist, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. So don't wait until it concerns you to speak up.
The U.S. exists only because of the better natures of other countries, including but not limited to France, without whom we would have lost our Revolutionary War. So many Americans don't even know our own history. I sit there and look at the Statue of Liberty, and the guy next to me goes, "Yeah, France. When was the last time they did something for us?"
Dear God.
Statue of Liberty. But all that aside, they recognized the independence of the U.S. and fought for the U.S., and their soldiers lost their lives, and their military blockade is the only reason we were completely overrun by the British. So when you want to think who should we as a country be thanking for our existence, the list is very, very long, but let's just start with France. So when Ukraine is asking that question 10 years from now, are they going to be saying, who do we have to thank for our existence, who helped us to survive this? Or are they going to be saying nothing because they're all gone? That's entirely up to us.
Chilling.
I must say, even though we were so unlucky because we were among first countries that were attacked by Russia after Ichkeria, after Georgia, and we're talking about modern history. Again, our life changed so quickly. I was deployed on the east in Donbass since 2015, many times, and I know for sure that people's life can change instantly, like in a second. Everything that surrounds you, all your comfort, your hot water, electricity, heating, everything can change with just a single shell or a cruise missile. And your apartment will never look the same. It's very horrible. One time in Mariinka in 2015, we were patrolling the area that was shelled by Russians a lot, and there were Russian sabotage reconnaissance groups. They were using some higher places, like higher floors of the abandoned buildings, as observation points. And we went there, and there was one room that was shot at by a tank. There was like a huge hole in the wall, and through this hole you could see Donetsk city. And it was covered with like fragments, with concrete, with all this dust. You could see like children toys covered with dust from concrete, from this impact and things like that. And there was a picture of a child on the ground, on the floor. And I was staring at it, thinking, what if at some point, what if there will be such a case when some other dude, bearded dude wearing a camouflage, will be standing in my own apartment looking at a picture of my child? Can it happen? That was the moment when I realized that everything that surrounds us can change very fast. And the reason I started talking about this is because we were so unlucky that in the modern history, we became among the first countries that were attacked by Russia. But at the same time, we were so lucky comparing to other countries that so many countries of the free world support Ukraine. Again, nobody expected that, specifically Putin, because he thought that this war could be won in just 3 days and Ukrainians will just give up and the world will never react because there's plenty of politicians and opinion makers that were bought because Russia spent $300 million on buying their loyalty around the world, on the West specifically. And they expected that the world will never stand with Ukraine because, like, what is Ukraine? What do you know about Ukraine? It's like, where is it, right? Is it part of Russia or something? But again, I didn't expect it myself, even though I have a lot of friends prior to this invasion. I had a lot of friends abroad. And so many people stood up and supported us. And it tells me that the world changed pretty much. We underestimate a lot of people in many, many cases. We underestimate ourselves a lot, but we also underestimate other people. We think that, new generations failed. People don't want to study and yada, yada. But because of this support of Ukraine, I realized that, no, we were fooled, by the way, because people actually can check facts. People actually can analyze situation. People can understand difference between Russian propaganda, Russian media, and what happens actually, because they can visit different resources, find as much information as they want, and build their opinion on this. And the most important thing is that people can feel our pain. And it's something that not everybody has, but appears that majority of people can do that. They can feel our pain for real, and that's why they can support us, because they see how Ukrainians are suffering. So I think that we are witnesses to very, very deep fundamental changes in international society, probably.
Right. And I think this brings us nicely to the point where we start rounding this up. But before we do that, let me just go ahead and thank the patrons. We've got Deneen Murphy, Dan D, Michael Wiseman, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Sonny Shell, Aaron Coalson, and Phil Calderone. Thank you very much for your support. And because of you, this can happen and continue. And if you would like to support the work, consider becoming a Patreon. Every little goes a long way. I'm just gonna hand this over to you all. What do you have coming up next, and where can we find you all?
I'll go myself. we're having all of you right over onto the shills coming up next. If our most amazing and lovely producer could drop the link as well, that'd be amazing. And then we can talk a bit more over there. I'll give it over to Nick, I guess.
My name is Nick. I'm the host of In Time. We are blessed to have Starsky on every Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, to tell us about what's going on in Ukraine. We also have Commander Lance McMillan, who staged the Iraq War for the 5th Fleet out of CENTCOM and is a very experienced commander who we also have on to discuss various U.S. military issues, and also with Starsky, so that we can try to get as complete a picture of what's going on as possible. We do interviews, politics, breaking news, and we also are community driven. So come by, check us out, and check out when we have Starsky on. But hopefully we have content that I think you'll like outside of that as well. So I hope people will come check us out. It's In Time, youtube.com/InTimeShow. So, and I'm being dragged to this after party that this guy here is hosting, although I'd have been there anyway. So just don't tell anyone.
Starsky, do you want to go?
I would like to thank you for inviting me. I have a channel. It's called Operator Starsky. I have some other social media, Instagram. There are a couple Operator Starsky, one original and a bunch of scammers. I'm not joking, unfortunately. And I would like to say thank you to all the viewers and to the board for invitation.
Amazing.
Thank you. And the rest of you, enjoy the rest of your morning, day, night, wherever you are. And Dean, this has been great. Let's keep this conversation going.
Yeah.
This will hopefully be one of many. In fact, I think we should. I know In Time channel do a very good, thorough update on things going on in Ukraine. So yes, I would recommend the In Time channel. Do you want to put the link to Nick's channel? Because they do.
Nick's original amazing idea that nobody else ever did before.
Yes.
I'm teasing him.
He was on it from the get-go. Yeah. Right. Thank you all very much. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.